All right. What is up, YouTube? Um, this is Mansour back at it again with another video. Today we're going to talk about how my family came to America. Because a lot of people, have been asking me, where are you from? I've had people at the masjid ask me if I was Albanian, if I was Syrian, if I was Turkish. So let's talk about how my family came to live in Anchorage, Alaska. And when I say family, I'm talking about my immediate family, because I have a lot of family overseas in places like Palestine, Lebanon, where else? Egypt, Jordan, uh, and UK, Germany, all overseas. Okay, so this is just my immediate family here in Anchorage, and how we came to live here in Anchorage, Alaska. Okay, so growing up, I only knew that my maternal grandmother was born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I didn't know her nationality. I didn't know her ancestry. I didn't know nothing. I just knew she was born in the U.S., had a U.S. passport, and she was born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So, growing up, I didn't know who to fit in with, right? And I've made a video on that before. I didn't know. I thought I'd try to fit in with the Puerto Ricans, with the Mexicans, the Colombians, with all of them, everybody that other than my people. So I did a DNA test. Found out that basically, 40% of my ancestry is Arab, 40% is from Northern Europe, and then about 19% is from northern Iraq and Turkey. So I'm basically 40% Arab, 40% British, and 19% Turkish, which is kind of funny because some people at the masjid asked me if I was Turkish. I am, but I don't identify. And I said I wasn't because technically 19% of my ancestry is from Turkey, from Adana predominantly, Istanbul, and Balıkesir. But, I don't identify with the Turkish side. I identify with the Arab side. But yeah, 19%. And that's due to historical events like the Ottoman Empire, which was why my family moved to America. So, yeah. Basically, how I identify to most people, when people ask me where I'm from, I say just half Palestinian, half British. But it's a lot more complex than that. There's some Egyptian in there. There's some Jordanian in there. There's some Lebanese in there. Some Yemeni, some Saudi. But not like Saudi, like Hijazi, like Banu Hashim, and kind of like that, and my family's part of a Bedouin tribe, the El-Tirabin tribe, which is the largest tribe in Palestine. It's also the largest tribe in Egypt. And most of that tribe is from the Naqab region in Palestine. There is some from Gaza and Khan Yunis and Mawasi. They're kind of related to the Al-Tirabin, but kind of not. It's interesting because somehow, way back, I'm from the Abu Nijmat clan, of the Al-Tirabin tribe. And yeah, so the Al-Tirabin are mostly from the Naqab in Palestine, southern Palestine, the 48, which was the occupied 48 lands. And there's some in Gaza, and there's some in the Al-Tirabin in Gaza are more in southern Gaza, around Khan Yunis, Qazan al-Najjar, like that area. And there's some in Egypt, around Nuweiba and Dahab. So basically, and then there's a small couple in Jordan, a couple families, Al-Tirabin families in Jordan around Aqaba. So that is basically, yeah, how I'm from all those different nationalities. The Lebanese part, we don't really know where that comes from. It could be from my grandpa's side, could be from my grandma's side. Knowing that lot of Lebanese moved to Massachusetts, which is where my grandpa was born. Or it could be from my grandma's side. So we don't really know. But I do think it's from my grandpa's side. It's more likely. Although there are a lot of people with the last name Mansour on my grandma's side, and that would explain a lot of it. And there's a town next to Beirut named Mansour-Hull, which would explain a lot. But my family came over during around 1895, somewhere around then. They moved to Pennsylvania. The Ottomans, they were anti-Ottoman, staunchly anti-Ottoman. They actually opposed everything the Ottomans did, or almost everything the Ottomans did. And they knew that something sketchy was going to happen between the Ottomans and the Brits and the French. So they came over to America. And at this time, most Arab immigrants were Christian, but my family is actually Muslim. So they were minorities. They were double minorities. They were triple minorities: Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim, and Bedouin. So quadruple minorities. And they moved to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And my great grandpa was born in Harrisburg in about 1900. My great grandma was born in about 1907, I think it was. And my great grandma went to college. My great grandpa didn't. My great grandpa worked as the postman in Harrisburg. His name was Daoud. Not really sure what his last name was. I know my great grandma's last name was Mansour. And I believe she was somehow her grandma was Al Tirbin, and her great grandpa was from the Banu Tamim, somehow related to the Majali family. So if you know the geopolitics, if you know the politics of Arab families and the politics of families in Palestine and families in Jordan and families in Bilad al-Sham and the Sinai Peninsula, you know basically where I come from. And I don't really know the Majali. I follow a couple Majali people in the Majali side of the family on Instagram. I know most of the people I know from overseas that I follow are most of my Mansour family, and that's who most of them are. So most of my family in Khan Yunis. But they came over to Harrisburg. My great grandpa was the postmaster. He worked at the post office, mailman. My great grandma was like an administrative assistant or something. My grandma was born in Harrisburg. Went to Bucknell for college. Met up with my grandpa. She was a administrative assistant in Cambridge, Mass. She moved to Cambridge, Mass after college. She worked at Harvard as a receptionist, and my grandpa was going to law school at Harvard. So basically, yeah, they got married, and they decided they didn't want to live in Boston no more. So they decided to come west. My grandpa came up here, opened up a law firm. Both of my uncles and my mom were born here, and we've been living here ever since. So yeah, that's basically my story. And the most fascinating part of the story is that, my grandparents, or my grandma she didn't know nothing about her family, or she didn't want to tell me nothing about her family, other than the fact that she grew up around Harrisburg, Mount Gretna, Mechanicsburg, that area. And she didn't tell me nothing about her family coming over from Palestine. She didn't tell me nothing about the Bedouin history, the Bedouin side. So, alhamdulillah, I've been learning about it. And yeah, that's the story of how my family ended up in Alaska. And then my dad's side of the family. I forgot to tell you about my dad's side of the family. So my dad, came up here working in the canneries. He's from Seattle. Oh, so he's from Chicago originally, but then when he was 10, his family moved to Seattle, and he finished school there. And then he met my mom. First, he came up to work in the canneries. Then he went to college, and he met my mom in college. And then he came back up to work in the canneries. Then he eventually bought his own boat and started fishing. And then he, met my mom again. They got married, and then I was born. So basically, and then my little brother was born. So that's how my dad got up here. But yeah, that's basically, because a lot of people, like with my dad's story, it's pretty typical. But my mom's side of the family, their story of how they got here is not that typical. Like most people that come up here, from like my grandma's part of the world, most of them either that come up to Anchorage, either come up to work as engineers for oil companies, or they're refugees and they come up here as refugees. And most of those refugees are not from my country, but they're from a different country. They're from places like Somalia, Sudan, places that have been ravaged by U.S. imperialism, Zionist imperialism, British imperialism, Canadian imperialism, French imperialism, Australian imperialism, etc., etc., etc. They've been ravaged by the Zionists and by NATO, and it's like that's their only choice is to move out, So, yeah, so that's basically my story. Like, subscribe, you know the drill. Share on Twitter, please, and thank you. And that's it. Your boy Mansour is out here. Peace.